my name, I introduced myself before, of course, Jason Nurse. Now, in addition to, of course, my role at CyberSafe, as I mentioned before, I am an academic. I'm a reader in cybersecurity at the University of Kent. It's a bit of a weird term, reader. It doesn't really mean that I read all day. I actually hate reading. But it's sort of this term on the way to becoming the glorious title as professor, of professor. Which, you saw a good example of Luca being a professor and what that looks like. So my fun fact, I am a keen baker. I love to bake, actually. And if I was not in cybersecurity, I would probably have a very successful bakery. I am convinced. Favorite recipes, if anyone is interested, my favorite things to bake are matcha cake. Anyone ever had matcha cake? It is delicious. Lemon basil shortbread. I mean, I am fancy like that. And then courgette and pistachio cake. Anyone ever had a courgette cake? It's actually delicious. If you've never tried it, trust me, initially I thought, not very good, delicious.
Jason, try beetroot brownies.
Now we need to, okay, that's another recipe that's been added. Thank you very much for that, beetroot brownies. I've tried them, but I've never made them. So thank you very much for that. Appreciate it. I'll grab you on lunchtime if you have a recipe to share. Right, so my session, though, let's focus on the actual reason I'm here. My session is to talk a bit about ransomware. Ransomware, we talk a lot about it. We discuss it quite a bit, especially from the perspective that it's a significant of concern for organizations. What I want to talk about, though, is something that I'm extremely passionate about, and that's not ransomware, but that's the sort of hidden price associated with ransomware, the hidden costs associated with ransomware. And that's especially related to humans. Ransomware is significant. People talk about it all the time. I'm sure it's one of the top things that organizations care about. But what I've found, based on some research I've conducted, is that unfortunately, people often focus on the costs, the financial costs, and there's actually a lot missing that we need to think about when we think about ransomware attacks. So firstly, we're in London. Anyone familiar with the incident that disrupted hospitals last year? Let me see by a show of hands. Anyone was impacted by that directly? This is a safe space. Feel free to say yes or no. Yes, there's some people that have been impacted directly. Ransomware has knocked organizations, has impacted organizations across the world, 100%. But when it starts impacting hospitals, it becomes even more significant, or critical national infrastructure. And this is one of the first, in the context of London, that actually where we had an attack, meaning that people couldn't get blood transfusions, people's blood tests were the results they couldn't get. It was very, very significant from that perspective. And what was interesting, in addition to that, was not only that people couldn't get their results back, but we also saw things like significant blood shortages. And also, the ransomware attackers actually publishing people's test results online, openly, accessible for anyone to go and see. And this was really gives you one quick example of the human impact when it comes to ransomware attacks, right? The individuals, the you, the me that are impacted, not some big conglomerate that can respond, the actual individuals. So a thing I want to focus on, and I think I want us to discuss a bit today, is not just the financial impact, but what else? What else is impacted by ransomware attacks? And I want you to go away thinking about those impacts and what we can do potentially about them. So the key question I want to discuss today is, what are the harms related to ransomware attacks beyond the dollars and cents or the dollars and pounds, especially the impacts on individuals and society? So, excuse me, how it relates to you. I want you to keep thinking about this as we go through the talk today, because often, I've given this talk once or twice before, and often it comes, well, I can understand ransomware attacks, but how does it relate to me? One way it relates to you is that some of you might be responsible for something called risk assessments. And it may relate to humans, it may relate to anything a bit broader. When we think about risk assessments, we often think about what's the impact of a certain attack occurring, or what's the impact related to a particular risk. This is how that can feature into those discussions. What is the impact if this ransomware attack occurs, not only on the business, but actually on the you and me, the people that actually respond are responsible for responding. So here's how I approach the problem, like an academic would do. Did a little bit of research from a literature perspective, conducted a bunch of workshops and interviews, especially trying to basically speak to as many security practitioners, but especially as many victims of ransomware attacks as possible. Now here's what we discovered. Has anyone seen this screen before? Has anyone suffered like I said, safe space, safe space. Anyone suffered a ransomware attack before? Okay, cool. So this screen, pray you never see it or one like it. Imagine you go to log in, you sit down, maybe you're working from at home, you prepare your cup of coffee, you open your laptop, and this pops up. A screen essentially telling you, if you're looking at this page right now, that means your network has been successfully breached. There's no decryptor. You either pay money or you're never seeing your data again. Many organizations, many people wake up to exactly this message. This is one group called Conti, which was one of the most successful groups to date. Now, one of the most significant findings from our work is that ransomware is a significant disruptor. Ransomware has put businesses across the world out of business. Can't function, can't respond. Here's one quote from the interviews. I think you'll struggle to find something that is so immediate and has such a cataclysmic effect on a company's ability to trade than ransomware. It happens literally overnight, and everything you had yesterday no longer exists today. This is the nature of ransomware attacks. I think ransomware attacks as well, and I've recognized this based, so I've done research in cybersecurity since 2007. And one of the things that, I kid you not, has made cyber much more of a board-level discussion than before, based on my research, is ransomware. Because before, oh, we lost some data. Oh, things are not working. Oh, the systems are a little bit offline. We probably can get them back up. We need to recover. Ransomware attack, all of our systems are offline. Our customers can't buy anything. Our suppliers can't be paid. We can't pay staff. That scares the heck out of any board. Ransomware is that. No, a significant disruptor. Here is an image from the Advanced Healthcare breach a couple years ago. So Advanced Healthcare, responsible for healthcare, they were breached. Their systems were basically taken offline. What it meant, a bunch of NHS trusts had to write prescriptions and notes for people's medical records on these. Imagine you go to the GP. You have existing conditions. Maybe you're even allergic to things. And the GP says, just to let you know, we have a ransomware attack currently, so we can't pull out any records to find out anything about you from the past. But I'm going to prescribe you with this. Or I need you to tell me about your medical history and how that relates to what we're going to discuss today. Those are significant. You know, if someone is allergic to something, if someone needs to get something, if there's some context that's required, and doctors can't access it, it's significant. It's a real game changer. And that happened in the context of the Advanced Healthcare breach a couple of years ago. In addition to that, one thing that I want to spotlight is this idea of orders of harm. Orders of harm is an interesting one, and that relates to the fact that when we think about ransomware attacks, they are significant when they impact organizations, the victim, excuse me, but they also impact a lot of others, and people actually don't think about this. So when a business is, a really good example is the London hospitals. So you might or might not know this, London hospitals, that attack did not impact or did not target London hospitals directly. Anyone know that? Anyone familiar with that? Yeah? So anyone know what the name of the organization that was actually targeted? Synovis. So ransomware attack group, they took Synovis offline. Synovis is responsible for managing the blood work in terms of blood tests and stuff like that for NHS hospitals. So here we have this knock-on supply chain effect where ransomware attackers took this organization offline. A bunch of NHS hospitals depend on that organization. So when we think about this, excuse me, we have first-order harm, so attacks on the organization itself. Then we have, in addition to that, we have anyone else that maybe does business with them. And then lastly, we have this idea of third-order harms on the economy. And this, once again, is something I want you to think about orders of harm as it relates to ransomware attacks. Now, if we focus on staff in particular, so the you and me, the people that might actually respond or need to deal with ransomware attacks, here's a quote from one of the security professionals we spoke to. Excuse me. "I forgot to eat. One of my team was hospitalized for a few days just through not caring for themselves. I had to go for a quick checkup in A&E because my heart palpitations were getting a bit out of control. I just drank too much coffee and not enough water, just trying to stay awake. But you do what you need to do." Once again, put yourself in this person's context. Ransomware attack has just happened. Organizations have said, you need to get everyone in. And people, unfortunately, and this has really been a situation for much more security professionals than one would imagine, everyone, all hands on deck, trying to recover, trying to deal with what has happened, how it has happened, why it has happened, and how they can actually recover as quickly as possible. So the impact on staff, and also remember the backdrop. Like, I don't know about you, but every probably 2 weeks, I see another news story talking about how burnt out people in the cybersecurity profession are. Like, it's significant, right? There's an increasing amount of work, there's less resources, but we're all expected to sort of do more with less. And in the backdrop of that, we have ransomware attacks that do this to people, in that they struggle, A&E, heart palpitations, etc. In addition to that, here's another slide, especially if you want a nice photo. This is an interesting one where we actually try to break down the impact that ransomware attacks can have on individuals and the impact that ransomware attacks can have on the staff within organizations. So thinking about stress, burnout, confusion, worry, these are all things that often no one talks about. People sort of expect when a ransomware attack happens that people within the organization will just do their job and recover. Is much more significant. And the average, we actually found an interesting study, an interesting part of our study is that when an organization went through a ransomware attack, especially a significant ransomware attack, the people responsible for that attack, within a year, they would leave the organization. Too much stress, too much burnout, too much worry, too much concern. It's just almost like, and this is actually the title of this research, PTSD. Literally, people just, every time there was one person that talked to us, and when they were explaining to us, they were like, every day I have to walk through the door to go back to that organization, I get shivers. Just because of this overall context of the impact of ransomware and how it impacts individuals when it comes to recovery. Now, the key thing I want to flag for you, and this is actually really, really important, not only the harms, but of course, what factors make things better and what factors make things worse. Anyone heard of Norsk Hydro? Let me see by a show of hands. Oh, actually, much more people than I thought. Norsk Hydro, super interesting company. But one of the most interesting things about them is their response to the ransomware attack they suffered a couple of years ago. And I'll talk about that in a second. But there are many, many things, once again, some key things for you to take away and to think about. There's many things that actually makes ransomware attacks or rather makes let's say almost like makes things worse when you're faced with a ransomware attack versus things that make things much better. So alleviates or aggravates that actual harm. Let's talk a little bit about these now. Here is one key thing that makes it worse. And this is once again a quote from one of the very senior security professionals that we interviewed. And I've chosen to anonymize the name of the company just in case there's someone in the audience from that company. But here's what they said. You take someone like X company, where an event happens, but it's clearly there's clearly something going on, but they don't say anything, essentially. They don't tell their staff, they don't tell their supply chain, they don't tell their clients, they pretend that everything is fine. Of course, everything is not. And then you have, on the flip side, a company like Norsk Hydro, who get hit by a ransomware attack, and within 24 hours, they're literally hosting videos on YouTube with their cybersecurity team working. Anyone actually watch any of these videos? Or saw it when it's live? So I see some heads shaking. It's really interesting. So they got hit by a ransomware attack, and they chose to respond with almost complete transparency. So they made people mirror what was going on, and they had videos streaming on YouTube of how they were actually recovering. The transparency was incredible. Whereas many other organizations, and I know this is a very touchy topic, and some of you, or probably all of you, might actually have internal policies around this. In terms of if a ransomware attack hits, do you say something to the media or do you keep quiet? What is allowed? What should you do? What's the best course of action? Whereas here, one of the key things that came out was, well, actually, it's much better to be transparent, make people aware of what's going on, as opposed to pretending that absolutely nothing is happening. And here are some of the key points that what could make things actually significantly worse. So firstly, treating the incident like an IT problem. Unfortunately, there's so many organizations that do this. So they focus on, oh, it's ransomware attack. It's an IT problem. It's not a significant problem. Very, very different story. Insufficient senior management or board level interest. I think this was interesting. There was some examples where there was a ransomware attack in an organization, and the IT team, or the IT or the security team, they got the HR team in, and then that was the entire response team. There was no PR teams, there was no legal, there was no cyber insurance, there was nothing like that, and they were trying to respond just with this small set of people. Thirdly, this idea of not considering employees' mental health or physical health. Really good example here is there's a few organizations in particular where they got a ransomware attack. There's one in particular I'll mention. They got hit by a ransomware attack, and what did they do? They got everyone, so they had like part-time staff and so on. They had different people on rotas. They got everyone in immediately. So everyone was called off, their away time, off time, and everyone was in immediately. Anyone want to guess what happened in 24 hours? Anyone?
They all fell over.
They all fell over. And who did they call now to replace these people? Well, no one, because they got everyone in at the same point in time. So I think these are the interesting things that we also need to consider. It relates to that human side, in that if you suffer a ransomware attack, you get everyone into the organization immediately to respond. What happens in 24 hours when the ransomware attack is still ongoing? Who's going to respond? Who's going to be able to pick up and continue? Poor communication, as I mentioned just now, I think internally as well as externally, the amount of ransomware attack is actually incredible. The amount of ransomware attacks where organizations have chosen not to say anything externally, but also not to say anything internally. And then engaging third parties that are ill-suited, especially data breach and response firms. Now, what can make things better? Once again, if you're thinking about key takeaways, things that make things better is probably very high up on that list. Ice cream is important, weirdly enough. And I'll explain the reason for that the reason for that in a second. So firstly, it's down to preparedness. So some people mention strong security culture. That is actually quite critical in that a ransomware attack happens. It's not really about helping people to understand what security is or why should they care, because everyone knows why they should care. Everyone appreciates why it's important. Everyone understands the context. That's really critical. Firm cyber insurance, I can't help but mention. I do quite a bit of work on cyber insurance. Cyber insurance comes up time and time again as something that's actually quite good. One of the big reasons for that many organizations cite is, let's say an attack happens, a ransomware attack happens. The average organization that maybe don't have cyber insurance, they have to get everyone together. They have to start trying to coordinate things. One of the great things about cyber insurance, of course, depending on providers, is that you call up this one organization. Of course, you have your own internal response. You call up this one organization, and they're happy to help you coordinate PR, coordinate incident response, coordinate data breach and forensics, etc. And then lastly, this last one from Participant 4, we had a video platform that was completely separate. Once again, another really interesting example where many organizations that we spoke to, they had Microsoft 365, for example. Ransomware attack occurs. Actually, they can't speak to anyone because no one has anyone else's number, because everything is on one platform. So what makes things better? Good crisis management and incident response. I think that's quite critical. Although every participant that we spoke to, remember we spoke to about 80-something security professionals, they all said you can have as great a crisis response or business continuity plan as possible, but the first time it actually gets tested, bits of it fall apart. All of them said it. all of them. Planning for the soft side, I think that's actually a big one. This soft side is important, and the reason I showed you the ice cream is one of the really great examples that came out is that for one organization in particular, they mentioned that during one ransomware attacks that they were suffering, they actually got an ice cream cart in, and they got a food truck in to the premises, and that actually picked up people's moods. It meant that people didn't have to travel. They also paid for hotels right next door, so people could actually go home and basically go and get some hours sleep. Thinking about this softer side, and let's not assuming people are robots, is actually quite critical and quite important. This idea of recognizing it's a marathon, not a sprint, and that's a really good one when I mentioned about not getting everyone in immediately, but thinking about how to pace people as it relates to ransomware response. The ability to respond, competent third parties is interesting, communication strategies, and actually good luck. I can't not fault luck. One organization, massive organization, they had just run payroll the day before they got taken offline, a significant ransomware attack, just the day before they ran payroll. What if it was the day after? So unfortunately, luck plays quite a key part. So my last slide. For you, what are the key takeaways? What are the things that you should be mindful of, thinking about, or taking away from this talk? I know it hasn't had the videos that Lucas has had, and I apologize for that. But I hope there's some key nuggets for you in the context of what do you do next with this information I provided. So firstly, I would suggest reviewing whether your security risk management plans consider the context of all the bad stuff, all the impacts that could actually occur if you were to suffer a ransomware incident. And not just, oh, the system will be offline. Ransomware attacks are so much more significant than that. And the amount of organizations that I have seen that have just focused on the technology and forgot all the other stuff that relate to it, they really, really struggle when the reality actually hits. Clearly define the impact and actually act with that in mind. I think that's actually quite important. Thinking about what makes things better and what makes things worse. For some organizations, having that ice cream truck or that food truck locally will make a big difference. For other organizations, it might not. And then a strong security culture. I can't mention that enough because every organization that we spoke to, it really makes a difference if people understand the importance of cybersecurity, how cybersecurity fits in, how it relates to their day-to-day, and it actually helps organizations think about ransomware response, ransomware recovery, and it helps organizations actually pull together. Some organizations struggled, and there was one big reason why. The attack hit, and what happened? The IT security team blamed people. The HR team blamed the security team because how could you let this happen? Legal came in and blamed everybody. No offense to anyone in legal. Legal came in and blamed everybody. And then all of a sudden, and that essentially makes it significantly worse because no one agrees, no one is on the same team, and the situation, attackers, the ransomware groups, the Conti, the Lockbit, et cetera, they're just in the back enjoying because the organization is in shambles, they don't know how to respond, they don't know what to do, and of course this has a significant impact on the organization. So, anyone's interested actually in reading research, I don't expect so, but have a look. But other than that, I am, sorry, did you get the photo? If you're the only two people, so I mean, I'm gonna leave it up as long as possible. It's freely accessible, it's super interesting because I wrote it, but yeah. Any talks? Thank you very much for listening.
Thanks very much, Jason. Okay, we have 10 minutes for some Q&A. Start over here.
Thanks, Jason. Alison Crockford, Build Secure Thinking. Cyber insurance, you mentioned it there. Have you done any other papers focused specifically on that and the impact that it has on businesses? Because it's an area where I know I've got a weakness. I don't really grok cyber insurance very well. It's something I want to understand better to stop thinking it's just a scam from insurance companies to take more money from me. But yeah, I'd be interested if you have any papers or any thoughts on that you would share.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you are so in luck. I sort of do. Actually, over the last couple of years, I've done three main things. One is human aspects of cybersecurity research. One is cyber insurance. And then the last one is very, very ransomware focused. Cyber insurance, I don't think, funny enough, there's actually someone in the audience who I won't point to. I've done a lot of work with them specifically on cyber insurance. Anyway. Cyber insurance, I think, is a good thing. I do think it has a bad rep in terms of it being a scam. Some people might say like other forms of insurance. But I think it actually is a good thing. And there's probably one big reason why. And I think that is the ability for an organization to call up one company. So let's say they get hit. Let's say they hit by a ransomware attack or some other cyber attack. So you're able to call up one company and say, I just got hit. I'm not sure what's going on. Can you help? Cyber insurance organizations, cyber insurance companies, can put you in contact immediately because they basically have a panel of companies to help with data breach response firms, incident response firms, PR firms, general counsel or data breach specific counsel, a bunch of organizations that typically the average company, unless they're large, can't have just on retainer hanging around. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits of cyber insurance because it gives you those options. Cyber insurance is also, depending on the organization you go with, quite good beforehand. So they have a bunch of post-event services, but more cyber insurers are actually having pre-event services.
So encouraging you to do cyber essentials, that kind of thing.
If you do cyber essentials, or if you sign up for policy with us, we will also sign you up to a security provider, for example, etc. So I think that's one of the big benefits. That being said, I will say there's one probably caveat, and that is that cyber insurance, one of the biggest challenges it has had is that cyber insurance doesn't have, like car insurance, like house insurance, hundreds of years of actuarial data to rely on.
Sure.
100%, if we ask a cyber insurance, an insurance company, what's the chance that over there will be a hurricane at 10 a.m. tomorrow, they'll be able to tell you with a good percentage. Ask a cyber insurance company, what's the chance that this organization will be hit by a significant ransomware attack in the next 2 weeks?
Yeah, it's an actuarial challenge. They won't know.
It's a significant problem, right? And
Thank
it's
you.
because cyber is just so different, and we don't have the actuarial data on it. It just changes too significantly. But really great question.
Great, thank you.
Feel free to grab me at lunch as well.
Thank you.
Any more questions? Yeah.
Hi, Lisa Ma. Thanks, Jason. That was really interesting. I think some of the reasons that you limited about how things could be, were made worse was actually you could actually put down to poor leadership, especially on the human side. So I'd be interested to know of the companies that you've perhaps worked with or the experts you've spoken to that have suffered ransomware. Did any of those companies actually identify that and start to invest in leadership training for their personnel?
So of the companies that I can think of, they actually did not. From the companies that I can think of, and it's not that many that I can think of offhand, they were still going through when I spoke to them, they were still going through what's the best response here. They hadn't gotten to the point of identifying the best response was, well, actually leadership training or better leadership would have been most appropriate to prevent against this in the future. I think the unfortunate thing about ransomware is that even though we've been talking about it for me, it feels like such a long time. For the average organization, unfortunately, for a lot of the ransomware epidemic, whatever we want to call it, it was very much of we just need to get better backups. And everyone was thinking, we just need better backups. Once we get better backups, we can respond. Thankfully, we've moved past that, and everyone recognizes, well, it's not only better backups, because what attackers are doing now is they're taking your data, they're taking the data, encrypting it, and if you say, well, actually, I don't need to pay you because I have backups, they say, oh, okay, well, just leak all your information online, and we'll email the ICO to tell them that we've leaked it online. And that's what they're doing now. So what we've seen is that organizations are trying to become better prepared for dealing with those ICO requests, but unfortunately, many of them aren't, okay, we understand and appreciate the nature of this problem, and therefore we will focus on better leadership. That is so critical, because many organizations, even though they think they're very mature, in the context of the day-to-day and the pressures that they get from on high and below, they're not at that point where they actually recognize and spot, hey, this is actually what we need to do next. But it's a good show. Good question. Good question.
Any more questions?
There's one here.
Yeah, thanks, Jason. Very interesting talk. My question is round about security culture. You mentioned about security culture coming up, out of your research. Out of those organizations that you looked at or that experienced ransomware, how will you describe the culture they have in place, the security culture, and are they doing something towards it if, for instance, it's a poor culture?
So from what I've seen, it's sort of very distributed. Some understand and appreciate security culture and have put things in place. For some others, they're very early on the journey of what security culture is, what it looks like. For some organizations, security culture is just people understand about security. For other organizations that are much more on the mature side, they understand the nature of security culture, what it means, and how it impacts people's day-to-day. For some organizations, they're still struggling of what's the difference between security culture and organizational culture? Are they the same? Should they be the same? Should they blend? Should they not blend? So I think to answer your question, it depends, and it's very, very different across organizations. The ones that actually were, that sort of had a better handle on how to respond, they did say that what made a big difference for them is a strong security culture. So people understand the importance of cybersecurity. People understand the need for it within the organization. People understand the importance of us actually banding together and understanding, for example, in the context of a ransomware attack, hey, we're going through something quite significant. It's better for us to come together and understand this is how we work on security, this is what we do in the context of security, as opposed to just splintering and saying, hey, security is not my problem, it's the security team's problem, it's not me. So I think it just varies significantly. And I think that's the reality of what I've seen in other organizations as it relates to security culture as well. It's one of the things that I wish companies would appreciate more and work more towards making it better. But unfortunately, some organizations security is just an afterthought. That's.
Thank you. I'm not too sure whether I mentioned my name. My name is Ty Drojai.
Yes, Ty is one of our speakers from last year, actually. 2 minutes.
I think we might need to move on to the next session.
I mean, if I'm the timekeeper, I think we have one more time for one more question.
Okay.
I think this has to be the last question, though. Yeah. There's a hand right. Where is it? I think it was behind you, actually, Glenn.
Fight it out, someone.
Hello there. Hi. I think I've got this on. Heather. Hi. MOD background. So I just had a quick question about the sort of metrics or the kind of trying to put a number on it.
Yep.
Because when you're trying to convince seniors, when you're writing your risk assessment or trying to assess it, they obviously respond to economics and the kind of cost, but I'm guessing that this work is starting to go towards, this is sort of the severity of how important that human cost is. Does some of your data, it's obviously a lot of qualitative data in there, but it sounded to me in your talk, you did cite some quantitative statistics there in terms of retention or, well-being and stress impacts and that kind of thing. It wasn't really a strict question, but just have you started to think about how organisations can put a number on it on par with things like economic impact?
It's a really good question. I have somewhat intentionally avoided putting numbers on it. And I know that I know the importance of numbers, and I know the importance, especially when it comes to benchmarking things, when it comes to reporting things upward. But I think for this research, I've tried intentionally to steer away from numbers, especially because, frankly, especially as an academic, I have no clue what number I would put to some of these things. I would be guessing. And that makes me more uncomfortable than saying, actually, I don't think a number can be put on this. I just think we need to recognize, as a community recognize, if a ransomware attack happens, we need to be thinking more than, okay, this system will be down for 4 days, which means that's X amount of million. But we need to think actually internally, if these people are really unwell or our staff actually turns over in 6 months, what is the impact on our organization? I think that's how I would leave it.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem at all. And then I probably should call it there. Thank you very much for listening.